Welcome. My name is Colleen Adrian, and I'm a parent educator. And today we're going to be talking about a topic for parents of teens, and especially if your teen is a little bit rebellious. I think that you'll find today's topic interesting. We're going to be looking at how a couple of aspects in astrology really impact that with a view to getting a deeper understanding of what's really going on for our teenagers and supporting them on their soulful journey. So I got interested in looking at the planetary aspects when I had a really sudden light bulb moment at a point when my son was 15, and things had quite suddenly gotten a lot harder. And the difficulties seemed to be especially around setting limits, and that just not working anymore at all in the way that I had become accustomed. And I remember having times of feeling a lot of anxiety and even quite a bit of fear over him just completely ignoring the limits. So it was really hard. And one day I happened to look at his natal chart and I realized that he was having his first Saturn opposition. And even though I didn't know exactly what that meant at that time, I know from my personal experience and having had astrology readings before that when you're having a Saturn transit, you really feel it and it's hard, right? It's a struggle. It takes work. It takes work to learn what you're meant to be learning at that transit. So knowing that Saturn has a reputation as kind of a disciplinary teacher, I was like, gave me a whole new insight. And I started to dig a little bit deeper. And some of the things that I really discovered, they offered me a couple of things. One was kind of what felt like an anchor in a storm. And I realized that because it's a transit, there was an end, there's a light at the end of the tunnel. It's not going to be this hard all the time. And it also really helped me to have some understanding about what was actually going on so I could be more supportive instead of panicking all the time, basically. So so it really supported me. And ultimately, I think it supported my son as well. And since then, I've really also taken some time to look at other transits and other aspects that might have a significant impact on my teen, but now I'm looking a little bit more broadly at all teens. And there's a cohort of young people who were born between 1995 and 2008, roughly, who were born with Pluto and Sagittarius. And for those of you who might not know very much about Pluto in the astrology realm, Pluto's known to be quite a heavy hitter and known to be associated with death and rebirth in terms of really deep soulful transformations in people's lives. And so I was curious about that as well. So our discussion today is really going to be focused on talking about what those aspects mean for teenagers in those age groups and how to continue to stay connected to and use your attachment parenting skills with your teenager, and especially if they're a little bit rebellious. But regardless of whether they're rebellious or not, I think you'll find the learning today helpful. So I've invited Diana Cary to be here with me today. She's an astrologer. And I'll just tell you a little bit about her before I hand things over to her. Diana Cary is a self-studied astrologer with strong leanings towards soul and counseling astrology and an emphasis on grounded and pragmatic support for her clients. She has a background in psychology as well as somatic and energy healing therapies. Her main focus these days is reading charts for people who are at a crossroads in their life and curious about how the stars can inform their next steps.
Yeah, that about sums it up. Thanks, Colleen.
Yeah, I'm so glad you could be here today.
Yeah, thanks for having me. This is so fun.
Yeah, it's going to be fun, I think. I'm excited to hear what you have to share with us.
Yeah. So shall I dive in at this moment then?
Yeah.
Okay.
And I think we talked about you starting with maybe just a little bit more specific information about the ages.
Yeah, absolutely. So just, right from the get-go here, we're talking just like Colleen said about Pluto and Sag. You're likely going to find that in your child's chart if they're born between January 17th 1995 and November 25th, 2008.
Mhm.
And there's a few little exceptions within that time frame. So in addition to looking up your child's Saturn, when we're talking about the opposition in that 15 or so age range, if you want to pause here and go to our show notes below and have a look to see whether your child has Pluto in Sag and where your child's Saturn falls, feel free to do that now. And I'm going to give the dates of Saturn opposition as well when we get to that part of the chat.
Okay, thanks. Great.
But yeah. But as far as Pluto and Sag, exactly what Colleen was saying, Pluto is the planet of destruction and rebuilding. It's about power dynamics, huge, okay? Every generation of Pluto that comes after the other is often in response to the generation before's Pluto. Pluto spends anywhere from 12 to 30 years within a sign. And so you can see with this one, 95 to 2008 is about 13 years. So that's on the shorter end. And Pluto in Sag came in as response to the Pluto in Scorpio generation that happened before. Pluto in Scorpio was a very secretive and shadowy and getting into the dark corners of society. There's a certain sort of suspiciousness to the Pluto and Scorpio generation. You can think about something like the dark web that got going during Pluto and Scorpio. On the other hand, Pluto and Sag, which is the generation we're talking about today in this talk, Pluto and Sag is the archer. They're very on point. They're aiming for ideals. They're aiming for their beliefs. They're aiming for their morals. They feel it in them. And they're looking into society and they're looking at where their belief systems and their ideals are not matching up. And they're going to be calling it out in society. And they're going to be saying, this ain't right. And they're going to be utilizing their force as a generation to shift the power dynamics. And they're gonna celebrate with their lively optimism the downfall of any societal structures that aren't in alignment with their moral compass and their ideals and their beliefs.
So it sounds like you're saying that there's a potential for them to expose some of kind of the shadow stuff that came up or that got formulated in society through those Pluto and Scorpio years. And they can actually sort of see through what might superficially look okay, but they can kind of see the ultimate truth underneath it. And they're on it and they're not tolerating it.
They're not tolerating it. And they're looking for justice. That's a big piece. The Sagittarius rules law and it rules politics and it rules philosophy, religion. So they're going big. The crux of the Pluto and Sag is that if a lot of times their aim is on target and sometimes they're off and they're going to be very blunt and without tact and very self-righteous at times in what they believe to be truth. And when you're working with a teen who really, truly, deeply feels this truth in their being, however, they just don't have the experience that an adult has, it's important to feel that compassion for them because that is so true to them and they just don't have the life experience just yet to understand the whole of it, but they're exercising that Pluto in Sag energy in themselves. And that's authentic and that's real for them.
Right. So important not to shut that down, but to find ways to really understand what it is that's inspiring and driving them, kind of almost the root of their passion, and support it, but maybe with, a few curious questions that might just help them from going down any paths that have an element of like serious unsafety that they can't foresee because they're only 16 or whatever.
Yeah. Yeah. Their desire to feel and act from that place of morality and idealism and belief is real. And then it's just helping corral them in a safe manner, like you're saying.
Right. It's real, and it's in service to society and humanity.
Yeah. We don't want that Pluto and Sag energy to lose its spark.
Right.
Yeah. So,
That feels so uplifting for me to hear.
yeah, the Pluto and Sag is they're going to be incredible leaders as we move forward. They're going to be calling out stuff that we're seeing. That, I mean, the energy has already been here. Pluto is now in Capricorn and is on its way to Aquarius. Okay, so there's, time has already passed, but they still hold these values and move forward in society. Even though Pluto's into different places, they still hold this the belief system. It really is about beliefs for them, and they're really deep into philosophy. They're really deep into religion, including atheism potentially. Like they're really into getting to the crux of, like you said, truth,
like a spiritual truth, a truth at a deeper truth on all levels. Physical, emotional, spiritual.
Yeah.
That's interesting because I noticed with my son when he was younger.
Yeah.
And I don't know if this is the way it always is, or if it's because he has Pluto and Sag, but I noticed with him that, we could be struggling over something. And if I got to the point where I actually, explained briefly to him something that was just kind of the absolute pared down truth of whatever I was asking him to do or whatever, things just went more smoothly. And often those explanations were just, sometimes they were spiritual truths, but often they were far beyond what I thought he should be able to understand at, say, 4.
Wow.
But somehow it just calmed it was as if it calmed his spirit.
Wow.
And even if he couldn't understand it at an intellectual level, it was just like, things settled and we could carry on.
Oh, that's beautiful, Colleen. Way to go. That, I imagine that was hard work at times for you.
Well, it was hard work and it never happened. I mean, telling the story now, it sounds beautiful, but it never happened without a whole lot of conflict and angst leading up to it.
Interesting.
As I struggled to really, figure out what was, honorable for me to uphold in terms of either expectations or limits versus what I should let go, right? So trying to stay aligned with my own integrity and then trying to figure out kind of what was, really true and what was, a leftover belief from a past generation that I needed to let go of or something, right?
Well said. And every generation is aiming to crumble the past expectations of the former and formers, generations. I mean, there's certainly, I grew up in the Pluto Scorp era, and I certainly noticed my own rebellion against my parents' Pluto in Leo. Often I was like,
right.
I was dealing with those two dynamics a lot. I mean, and all of us can reflect on that. These generational energies that come through the personality is fascinating. And I remember, Colleen, in our prep, we wanted to talk about how, just a reminder to everyone that we're just talking about these few little itty bitty moments in one's natal chart, but how it expresses itself in each individual is going to be so unique. We can hear the themes today, and you might notice with your child some of the themes we're talking about, but certainly it can come out in very different ways depending on the person, because it's aspected differently in everyone's chart.
Right. So to give one example of that, it would be like Pluto, all of these kids in this cohort have Pluto and Sagittarius, but what house it's in is gonna affect exactly where in their life it's most prominent, and so on and so forth.
Exactly.
or
And
whether it's right next to their sun or Pluto's right next to their sun or whatever, right? Those things all
exactly.
are going to have a
I-
big impact as well. So yeah, as you said, this is one prominent piece of the puzzle, but still in some ways a small piece of the puzzle.
yeah.
Yeah.
And those are some more links that we're going to put below in the show notes to just learn some basic astrology. If you're in any way inspired after this talk to learn more, we're gonna put some links for some basic astrology free websites to have a poke around.
Okay, that sounds great.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
thanks for that. So
Yeah.
so I'm wondering if we should move on. Do you have anything else to say about Pluto and Sagittarius before we move on to talking about the Saturn opposition transits?
No, I feel pretty complete there. Yeah. Was there
Yeah.
anything you wanted to add?
I don't think so. I think we've kind of covered it, and I've kind of made a few suggestions for how to really honor that in your kids. You know, I think it's just important to really make sure that you're inquiring into what's driving them and what they're passionate about, and connecting on that level, and just being really careful to limit any limits that you might put on them to real, true safety issues, as opposed to something that just might make you feel anxious because of your past belief system, but may not be, you know, such a huge safety issue after all. And
Well said.
I've
Yeah.
had my own personal journey with that, which has been challenging, but
It's that
rewarding
element
and
of power that,
growth inspiring.
yeah,
Yeah,
right. And it's the power dynamics that you're dealing with when you're talking about Pluto.
right,
It's power. It's who's got the power. And of course, we want to be empowering our teams as much
right.
as possible and honoring,
Thank you.
honoring what's coming through for them, and exactly what you're saying, ensuring that your own belief systems and your own ideals and your own morals aren't being enforced upon them when they're a brand new generation that's here to
Yeah,
do different things in this life than
yeah.
your
And it's
generation was here to do.
yeah, and just it's an opportunity to really level up your own belief system and kind of update it. It's like getting a new operating system for your computer. You know, you sort of level up, and then you're better able to kind of navigate the current world, anyways, right? So
Yeah, let them inform you.
it's painful,
The
but it's good.
one thing, thanks for asking if we want to say more. One other thing that came up was it's understandable why they're really into social media,
Oh, okay.
because that is a platform for which morals, ideals, beliefs, I'll just keep repeating it, has a platform to be expressed.
Right.
So you can see why it's such a, from a Pluto and Sag standpoint, you can see why it's such a valid and important tool for that generation to be using, because they're going global. They're going more global than any other generation has had an opportunity to. Pluto and Scorp was on the edge of it,
Yeah.
but Pluto and Sag is really the first babies who were born into a digital world.
Wow. Yeah.
And just honoring that that's their reality, that's their
Yeah.
truth.
Yeah. Thanks. That's really helpful, because I know that screen time and being online is a huge issue for our parents. And I think many of us, myself included, have had to relook at our values around that and figure out what's important and what's not important, and how to, how to navigate and how to set limits and still, as we've already mentioned, honor what they're here to do and what they need to do.
Within the context of what they were born into.
Exactly. Yeah. So nicely said. Thank you so much. That's really
Yeah,
helpful insight.
totally.
So let us move on to talk about the Saturn opposition. So I think, are you going to talk first a little bit maybe about just what a Saturn opposition is really generally, and maybe what the energy of Saturn and the energy of an opposition is, to get us started? Great.
Exactly. You bet. Yeah. So Saturn in our charts is a place of limitation. It's a place of structure. It's a place of boundaries. It's a place of knowing. It's a place of deep strength
Mhm.
because it's where we feel most controlled,
Hmm.
um, for better, for worse.
Right.
um,
And
it's,
so
yeah, it's a
controlled
place
might
of hard
be
work.
linked with a feeling of security as well.
Yeah. Well
Okay.
said. Yeah. Yeah. It's a place where it's hard for us to let go. It's a
Mhm.
place where we have to put a lot of hard work and time into developing. Um, yeah, yeah, that's what Saturn is.
Okay.
So a Saturn opposition is when in the sky, where Saturn is currently in the sky is in opposite place to where you were born, where Saturn was when you were born. And in a
Mhm.
couple of moments, I'm going to bring up a chart. We'll have a couple of charts to look at so you can visually see what that looks like.
And the energy of an opposition?
Energy of an opposition is interesting. It's often a force coming to you from the outside that is antithetical to your own natural way of doing things. Anytime you
Right.
have an opposition in your chart with any planet. So your way of Saturning is being challenged by an external force in placing on you the opposite energy of how you would typically Saturn.
Okay.
So I feel like an example would be helpful.
Okay. Yes.
I will just also say it is a way of keeping in check your actions. So when you take action into the world, that Saturn opposition is really going to face you as a consequence and show you, here's what happens when you do this. Here's
Okay.
the consequence from the outside world reflecting back to the action that you took and the way
Right.
that you were, particularly around themes of boundaries, limits, structure, etc. Okay.
Right. And so that's the that's where the reputation of the disciplinary teacher comes from then.
Nice. Taskmaster.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. Like they're that gym, the person, the trainer at the gym who's like, 5 more reps, and you're just
Yeah.
like, I can't. And it's making you continue the 5 more reps of
Yeah.
exhaustion, just really teaching you the lessons.
Yeah.
15 is a huge age. Around 15 is a huge age of lessons. It's turning fantasy into fact. It's a reality check that
Hmm.
people go through, kids go through. They go through it at about 7 too, developmentally. There's a Saturn square that
There.
happens.
Yeah.
It happens again at about 22.
Right.
Another square happens. And then a lot of us have heard about the Saturn return that happens around the age of 29 or so,
Mhm.
where again, there's just Saturn loves to get our feet on the ground and like planted in the reality that we are creating for our life and saying, is this
Right.
working for you? I'm
Okay.
showing you it's not, or I'm showing you it is. Keep going, work
Yeah.
harder.
Nice.
Yeah. So shall we start? We'll dive in with Saturn
Yeah.
in Cancer. So
Yeah. So,
go ahead.
actually, can I just ask you to say a couple words first before we look at the specific charts about what that means for teens in general? So that's why we see a tendency for more of a rebellious piece there, and it comes on quite suddenly as that transiting Saturn starts to come into opposition. Is that right? And it
Yes.
seems as if the when you were talking about the limits coming from outside, I was thinking, okay, maybe that's the parents sometimes, right?
Oh yeah.
So all of a
Yeah.
sudden, you're this bad guy, or you're this person that's setting the limits, but really, and in some cases you might need to do that, but really, what they're struggling with is just an acute, tell me if this is right or not, they are much more acutely aware of limits and also how they feel about limits. at this time. And so they're just way more sensitive to anything that feels like a limit. And if
Yeah.
you put yourself in the position of being that limit maker, you're going to be the recipient of the backlash.
Yeah. Yeah. I think the examples will really help give context of what we're
Okay.
talking about with this
Perfect.
external energy. Yeah, that's a great question to just say, like, so what is it exactly that they're feeling? And I think just hearing the juxtaposition between how they operate in Saturn and how this opposite energy is impacting them, you can
Right.
hear how it's just like it butting heads is inevitable.
Okay, so
Yeah.
the outside energy might come from the parent, but there's all sorts of places that it's going to come from, and you're going to talk about that in the specific examples.
Yeah, I mean, it's
Okay.
going to come through in many opportunities, and challenges will arise, but the running themes will be the same. So whether it's the parent, the teacher, a boss, peers,
Right,
maybe a challenge that they're up against in their own hobbies and sports and such.
right.
But the energies of what's opposing them is going to be specific to where their Saturn is in their birth chart.
Okay, well, that sounds great. Let's have a look at that then.
Okay, so we're going to start with Saturn in Cancer. So this cohort they were born June 4th, 2003 to July 16th, 2005. Okay, so if your kiddo was born between there, they were born with Saturn in Cancer. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to draw some circles around the parts of the chart that we're looking at, because it can be a bit of a messy endeavor here. Okay, so first we're going to point out the glyph for Cancer, which is up here in the top corner here. That's the Cancer sign, and we're looking for the glyph of Saturn, which is this little guy right here. Okay, so this person was born on June 17th, 2003, and they were born with Saturn in Cancer. Now the opposition is just,
Sorry to interrupt, can you just point
yeah.
out the two lines that are the limits of Cancer at either end?
Oh yeah, absolutely. Let
So
me just grab a mouse here.
so anybody that's born with Saturn in Cancer will have their Saturn somewhere between
These two lines here.
Yeah.
Yeah, you bet. Yeah, thanks,
I'm
Colleen.
pointing at my screen.
I love it. Okay, so thanks, Colleen. So now I'm going to go down here to the opposite part of the chart, and I'm going to circle the glyph for Capricorn, because Capricorn is the opposite sign to Cancer up here. And the Saturn in Capricorn that we can see had just entered. So this person went through this transit on December, I'm just going to grab my mouse here. Up here you can see on December 29th, 2017 is when this person, born June 17th, 2003, went through their Saturn opposition. Okay. So Saturn in Cancer. Let's take, should I keep the chart open while I talk about this, Colleen, you reckon?
I think that now that people have seen it, I think we can close the chart, and
okay.
if people need to pause and have a look at it for a little bit longer, they can, or
yeah,
as you've already pointed out, if you want to make an exact chart for your child or yourself, there's a link to do that for free on a website in the show notes below.
exactly. Okay,
Yeah.
great. Okay, I'm going to stop share.
Thanks.
So Saturn in Cancer, like we talked about, it's going to be a place where they feel restricted. So Cancer is the sign of incredible emotional intelligence. It's the sign of they're protective. They're very or the energies of Cancer is protective, and it's about emotional intelligence. And so what you're going to notice with a kid with Saturn in Cancer is that they're going to keep their emotions inside. They are going to be feeling highly emotive, but they're going to keep it repressed. They're going to suppress it. They're going to keep it within, and they're not going to let it out to just anybody. They're going to have to feel very, very protected, and they're going to have to feel very safe.
Mm,
These kids are also going to be very protective of their family and their friends, and they're going to love to be at home and have
mm.
a nest. That's going to be very important to them.
Nice. Yeah,
Do you
that paints
have,
a
I
picture.
have more to say, but I wonder what you think of with that, because I know your kiddo had Saturn in Cancer.
Yeah, all of that fits. Highly emotionally intelligent, um, intuitive, um, beyond belief in terms of other people's emotions and so on. Can really feel other people's emotions. And yeah, yeah, I definitely,
Loves to nest at home. Was that?
yeah, quite a bit.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, they like to be in their shell.
Yeah. Yeah.
Um,
Actually, now that you mention it, we had a hard time staying away on vacation when he was little. I want to go home and see Kitty.
they love their nest. That's very Cancerian. So, Saturn is about control and Cancer is about flow. So
Right.
you can see how the two energies are going to, just within their own birth chart, we're not even talking about the opposition yet, just within their own birth chart is going to be a bit of a hindrance at times, because they need to control their emotions, and we all know emotions are messy. Like
Mm,
they get out of hand, and for them that's really scary. that's
right.
that's genuinely something that you gotta maintain. And so what's so important for people with Saturn in Cancer is that they have safe outlets. They have that one or two people that they can take their shell off, and they can let it
Mhm,
out, and then put their shell back on and go back out into the
mhm.
world and feel like they had somewhere to let it go.
Right.
So important,
Okay.
because there's a lot going on beneath the surface, and it's not necessarily going to be a parent who's the safe place, and that's okay.
Right.
That's okay.
Right. So important as a parent, then, if you think there's lots of emotions going on, to, if you feel like you're sometimes that safe place for your child, probably better to not ask really direct questions, but to sort of sidestep a little bit and just allow space for there to be and safety. And to just repeat something I said earlier, or I don't know if I've mentioned this yet, actually, just avoiding kind of analytical questions or really pointed questions, and just really more affirming and offering opportunity for them to express, and maybe acknowledging how hard it is, or something like to that effect, rather than digging into what the exact emotions are or what to do about it. Would that
Yes.
be appropriate?
How hard it is to express emotions with this
Right.
with
Okay.
this aspect in one's chart. It's really
Mhm.
difficult, and
Okay.
that's okay, and that
Okay.
there's nothing wrong. It's
Yeah.
okay to have a hard time
Nice.
expressing emotions. Let's find a way through. Let's
Yeah.
find a way where you do feel safe to do so. It doesn't have to be a big thing. It can just be one or two people or ways. It
Right.
doesn't, they're not gonna take the lid off
Right.
and just become this super expressive person with their emotions ever,
Right.
likely.
Okay. Well, that's really good to know. And then I guess also keeping them connected with other adult mentors, or making sure, especially if your kids are still younger, that there's people in their lives that they're forming relationships with, people who are stable emotionally, people who might also be able to be a support, um, if they're not feeling comfortable to share with their parent. Okay.
Yeah, and Colleen, just as a side note, you're hitting on the Jupiter return when you say that language, which is something I'll just leave as a little hint to people for a future talk that we've been in discussions. But that
Okay.
everything you just said is why the Jupiter return is so important. But
Okay.
we'll just hint about that in this
Okay.
one.
I'm excited to hear that in the next talk.
Yeah,
I
yeah.
want to know more about that too.
So Saturn in Cancer, as we were looking at the chart up there, and Saturn in Capricorn is down here.
Yeah.
And so the energies of that opposing feeling that they're going to be experiencing is a sense of strict rigidity, like not allowing for, it's like it's going to actually kind of enforce their own repression. They're going to notice that they
Right.
don't have space to express their emotions during the audition. They're going to feel so almost suffocated, that there's just no, they've just got so many boundaries and structures around them, because Saturn in Capricorn is at home. Saturn loves being in Capricorn because Capricorn is the sign of structures and boundaries.
Right.
And so that, I feel for that Saturn in Capricorn cohort that had to go through that, because they're noticing from the outside there's nowhere for them to turn. And so the key for
Right.
parents with that Saturn in Cancer cohort is that they don't try to, like, they're not going to submit. They're not going to be able to deal with harsh authoritarian approach whatsoever. That's going to make them just clam up even more.
Yeah, I
Literally,
can vouch for that.
they won't submit to the strictness.
Right.
They'll out strict you.
Yeah, they will. Yeah. Connection is the key, I think. Yeah.
Yeah.
I
So
didn't mean to
yeah,
cut you
wherever they
off
find
there.
that in their life, that's the theme of what they'll be feeling. Perhaps a
Okay.
coach, perhaps a teacher, perhaps a bully at school.
Yeah. And it really is just a reminder too, and it's helpful for me, and I'm assuming probably for our audience members as well, to just really have a lot of compassion for how painful that would feel, to be feeling so tightly constrained, and to have those intense emotions around it, but to not always be able to express them.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, yeah.
So
So just
lots of,
exactly, there's not, if we take astrology to be true, and that it is, like you said earlier, it's a transit, this time will pass. It's all about how to provide the salve for the heart, and just help them navigate through the tough waters, because
yeah,
it's tough.
it is
But
tough.
that's the transits of life, for all of life.
Yeah.
It's just, it might be the first time they're really experiencing a really tough transit.
Yeah. Yeah.
Might be, not always, but
Yeah. Well, and probably it'll be close to the first time they're experiencing a tough limiting transit, where they're at an age where they're, going to be making more decisions on their own, as opposed to um, somebody else making their decisions for them. Right.
there's that action and consequence piece with it all.
Mhm.
It's like life says, oh, you took that action, here's life throwing back to you the consequence of it.
Yeah.
And it's, yeah, ouch, it's painful.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. So that was super insightful. Thank you.
Yeah.
So should we move on to the um, folks who were born with Saturn in Leo, and they're at the time of this recording, which is late November 2021, they are in their Saturn opposition.
Yeah, right. So those folks
Right now.
are born July 17th, 2005
Mhm.
until September 2nd, 2007. So if your kiddo's birthday is somewhere in there, that's the cohort we're looking at.
Mhm.
And I'm going to bring up the chart so we can just have another look. Okay. So,
Diana, I can't
oh, that's
see it.
Saturn in Cancer, isn't it?
I actually can't see anything. It says Diana has started screen sharing, but it's not showing up.
Oh, yeah. We
There's
had this
nothing.
issue in practice, didn't
That
we?
happens sometimes too. Still not showing up.
Huh. Okay. Well,
It was
kind of
so,
know what that looked like.
yeah. And you could try bringing up the cancer one and see if it shows, and just point with your cursor to where.
Yeah.
Yeah. Oh, there
Anything?
it is. That one's working. Interesting.
Okay. Okay. Well, that's fine. I'll bring up that circle again, and I'll just circle where I'm talking about, even though the glyph for Cancer won't be there.
or for Saturn.
Oops. Yeah, thank you. That's actually what I meant. So here's the sign of Leo. And what we're talking about is an opposition down here to, oh, sorry, everyone. There we go. To Aquarius.
Mm-hmm.
Saturn and Leo. Okay, let me close this. It's not as fruitful without being able to see Saturn.
Yeah.
So Saturn is inhibitive. Okay. Leo is expressive.
Oh.
they are dueling it out. Saturn wants to contain and control, and Leo wants to let it go, like just heart opening. Here I am. Okay. So with Saturn and Leo, that cohort is going to find it really difficult to self-express. They're going to have trouble expressing their creativity. They're going to have trouble being in the spotlight. They're going to deep down, they're going to want that. They'll look to the world and say, wow, how amazing, because that Leonian energy in their chart is very strong. It's Saturn's there.
Yeah.
And so like I said earlier, it's something that they're going to have to work towards through their life, because it's a place of hard work. However, if they pursue it, they'll be very diligent, creative humans. It'll be a discipline for them, their creativity, which is healthy. But it can be really difficult for them to feel safe enough to share their creativity with others. For Leo is the sign of, of pride. There's a lot of proudness there. And so if they're feeling inhibited in expressing their creativity, pride's going to come in the way and make them feel, you might get a sense of like they're better than that, is kind of an energy that they might put off, but really they're just protecting their sensitive, creative heart that actually wants to express, but has a hard time doing it.
Right. So are you saying when you say they're better than that, they might be reluctant to engage in some of the same creative things they were engaging in before, because they are lacking self-confidence maybe? Or
yeah, they'll have a quality, pardon me, I'm just going to plug my computer in. They're going to have a quality of not feeling safe to express, and so then feeling like a looking down on people who are expressing their creativity.
Okay, thanks. I was kind of getting the feel of what you were saying too, but I was struggling for the words as well too. So they're sort of looking down, but it's really, that's a cover for their own inner angst of not feeling confident enough right now, because they're feeling that push and the limitations of Saturn.
Yeah, and they're feeling that they have to control their self-expression when creativity and self-expression doesn't. It does best when it's just flowing, when it's just like the bonfire just going, and you just have the flames happening, because that's what their Leo wants to do. But Saturn's there trying to contain the fire and say it's not okay to self-express in that way, or there's certain limits and boundaries within which you can express yourself, and that actually can be a place of strength for them, that they get very specific and very focused on how they express their creativity. So it's not all over the place, but it's very direct of like, here's how I do it. And so to ask them to, well, then why don't you try doing it this way? Or why don't you go try that other way of creativity? They're going to say, no, this is how I do it. And you just need to allow that for them, because that's what feels good for them. So they're going to be quite specific in the way they express their creativity. And they're probably going to be very particular about who they express their creativity with. They need to find safe people, just like Saturn in Cancer needed safe people to express their emotions. Saturn in Leo needs a safe audience that warmly welcomes them and doesn't allow for their pride or self-consciousness to get in the way.
That's so interesting, because that certainly can be problematic sometimes in public school. you know, it would be very anxiety producing, I would think, in some public school environments, depending on the teacher and so on. But there's certainly my experience with public school is there's a lot of classrooms and so on where not enough safety would be created for that somebody who's feeling vulnerable to really express.
And you're giving a really good example of what they feel through the Saturn opposition.
Right.
Saturn in Aquarius. So Saturn in Leo, the Leonian energy is pay attention to me. Put the spotlight on me. This is, to be clear, this is a natural and important part of the zodiac. This is a human archetype that is required for the fullness of it all. It's okay to take on what would we be without performers that we can look up to who are in the spotlight? They bring something to our life. Okay. So that's Leo's energy. Aquarius, instead saying, you are one of the group. We all are unique. You're not special.
Right.
And there's Saturn in Leo wants to feel the specialness, and there's nothing wrong with this.
Right. You're just
from an opposed.
Diana,
you actually aren't all that special. Your gifts are unique to you, but everyone is unique. Are we having connectivity issues?
We've had a little bit of connectivity issues. I don't know if you heard me say your name. I lost a few words there, but okay. I think I got the gist of it. That really, when you are born with Saturn in Leo, it's not only normal to want to have the spotlight on you in terms of what you create and what you put out in the world. It's really needed by our humanity. It equals everything out. We all have the gift to give, and the Aquarius energy is really we're all equal. You're not something special. So there's that energy kind of pushing back, the fact that Saturn is in it, and then, which limits as well. And then there's that other energy along with Saturn pushing back that really feeds into them having a period of struggle and maybe not feeling confident to self-express. And as you were talking, I wonder if I can just run this by you. As you were talking about that, I was thinking, so if it's important, if they sometimes can actually hone in on an area where they do feel safe, or where they do feel like this is the way I want to do it right now. It sounds like that would be the kind of situation where to support your teen, instead of saying, well, like, why don't you do it this way? Or you used to do it that way, or it'll work better if you do it this way. You're going to want to say, you're going to, first of all, just maybe want to applaud it.
Nice.
And if you do see like a huge safety issue, like we're talking almost life or death here, you would maybe approach it by saying, I wonder, what will happen if you do this, and I wonder about that. But it sounds like unless there's a huge gigantic risk involved, that really offering any of that type of advice that could potentially be limiting is just not helpful at all.
Yep. Safety aside, just stay out of their way.
Yeah.
And be respectful of when they're ready to share their creativity with you and when they're not.
Right.
Yeah. Let them choose their audience.
Right. And their timing. Nice.
Timing. Thank you.
Saturn.
So that's, that's a piece that can be emphasized about Saturn, that you and I have talked about how this is all, hopefully we have 3 Saturn transits in our life, of Saturn returns in our life, maybe not, but about 30, about 60, about 90. And so we kind of live in 3 chapters, Saturnian wise. And the first chapter at the Saturn opposition at 14, they're halfway through their first chapter. And we're looking at the whole transit of what Saturn's bringing for them in their first 30 years of life. And there's lessons to the soul. that it has to learn. And so never rushing their process through this
Right,
time is so important because
right,
we're looking at the long game.
right.
Yeah.
Thanks for reminding of that. So
Thank
I
you.
think what you're saying is just all of the learnings that we're talking about with regard to where their Saturn is and where it is in an opposition, or a square or whatever, which we're not talking about squares today, but this Saturnian learning that we're discussing today, that there is going to happen again over and over and over again in life. There's going to be more opportunities. So there's no rush for them to learn any particular amount of it now. It's just all part of the journey. There's
Yeah.
no
We
rush.
want, we, we want them to have a healthy relationship to hard work and a
Hmm.
healthy relationship to adverse experiences. We want
Right.
them
And limits.
we're building their stamina to move
Mhm.
through this in life. We're helping
Mhm.
them. And so yeah, unnecessary, like you said already, being compassionate is just so important during this time.
Yeah. Yeah. All right. Well, thank you. So shall we move on to talk about
Yeah,
the young folks who aren't quite at their Saturn opposition yet, but they were born with Saturn in Virgo.
that's right. Saturn in Virgo, September 3rd, 2007 to October 29th, 2009.
Mhm.
And then there was a little bit more, April 8th, 2010 to July 21st, 2010.
Mhm.
um, should I try the screen share?
Yeah.
Let's
Let's
try
have
one
a
more
look
time.
and see if it works. Nope, it's not going to work.
Not going to work for us.
Mercury's not even retrograde.
Right. Okay. Um, okay. So Saturn and Virgo. I'm sure glad that first one worked.
I am too. I think people have the idea.
Yeah.
It'll be okay.
Yeah.
So
Saturn and Virgo. So this is where Saturn actually feels a little shinier than the former two, where it was a lot. It this has more coherence between Saturn and Virgo because Saturn is
okay.
structured and Virgo is organized.
Right.
So you put the two together and you get a rather diligent, hardworking, um, uh, sometimes perfectionist, but certainly a very driven individual
Hmm.
who's, there's a certain tenacity to this placement
Mhm.
that gives them, for them, work is life, life is work. And that hard work, they're not afraid of it.
Mm.
They just need to know, um, they're really good at finding the problems and systems and
Yeah,
how they're going to be really driven to figure out how to fix it.
right. And detail oriented for Virgo, right?
You got
Which
it.
is where the perfectionistic issue can come in if there's not some other balance, either that they learn in their family or that's in their chart that helps them balance that out.
Yeah. Yeah. So you might feel almost in awe at how hardworking a Virgo and I mean a Saturn in Virgo is. Like
Hmm.
you might be almost concerned. Like, shouldn't you be playing more? Shouldn't you be having more fun?
Okay.
Fun isn't probably the easiest access for them. Neither was Saturn and Leo, just as a side note. That's fun is difficult for them.
Hmm.
But for the Virgo, they're not desiring the fun. They're desiring to be in service. They're desiring to figure out
Hmm.
how they can best. Um, yeah, it comes. I'm sorry, it just comes back to what I said. They can look at a situation and a structure, and they can say, "There's the problem, and here's how I'm going to fix it." And they're just
Wow,
going to zoom. They're
that's a
probably
gift.
going to have amazing jobs where they're working with technicalities. That's
Hmm.
that's going to be they're going to be super analytical. Um,
Right.
and yeah,
So if they're really used to having that type of energy, and I know enough about Piscean energy, which is opposite, to know that That's going to be a little bit of a, I don't know, is it a wake up call? Like how, I wonder how it feels for them. It's like for
Yeah.
everything to be a little bit more kind of fluid and maybe wishy-washy and
So
I don't
they love predictability, right? And
know.
they
Right.
want to feel like they're in control.
Mm-hmm.
And then this opposing force coming through, Saturn opposition in Pisces, is going to say, life is also completely messy, completely unstructured, like the ocean depths. Like
Mm,
there's no walls in the ocean. And like I'm taking the walls away from you and everything's going to spread out everywhere. And how
mm-hmm.
are you going to deal with that?
Mm-hmm.
How's that going to feel for you? So a coming apart you're going to see in a Saturn invert Virgo opposition. You're going to see
Right.
them fall apart a little or a lot
Mm-hmm.
because they're not going to know what to do with themselves.
Right. I was going to say it would be like if that structure and finding problems and being organized and so on came so easily for them before, and then all of a sudden they hit this wall where it's not easy, that would just be really hard to cope with.
And they're going to be really upset because they're going to lose that control that they typically have had.
Right.
And they're going to be mad at whatever the external energy is that's making their world dissolve for a
Right.
bit.
So there's that thing that happens for all of us where if we look and try to blame, we're not going to kind of get very far, but there probably is a pretty strong tendency to do that, especially at that age. Where they maybe even haven't had a lot of experience, where they won't have had a lot of experience with those two opposing energies before.
Exactly.
So it'll be, yeah, hard to cope
Exactly.
with and easy to blame.
Yeah. Um, telling them to just relax and don't worry and everything's going to be okay. Like those big universal phrases won't be helpful for them.
Yeah,
That is not the antidote
I would
for
think
them.
that would be pretty painful.
Yeah.
Well, I think that's pretty painful across the board, but it would probably be, I'm glad you mentioned it because it would probably be especially it would be especially tempting to do
Yeah.
for your child who's undergoing that experience. And yeah, a good reminder not to do it. Thank you.
Yeah. They're going to be stressed
Yeah.
and you're going to want to help alleviate their stress, but it's going to be important that they feel like they're in control of how their stress is alleviated.
Okay. That makes a lot of sense.
Whatever way you can give back the control to a Saturn and Virgo going through their Saturn opposition is going to be medicine for them.
Nice.
I mean, it's a medicine for all the Saturn energies, control, control, control.
Mm-hmm.
But a Virgo especially, I think, is going to feel like their world's falling apart, and any little areas that they feel like they can be in the driver's position will
Right.
be medicine for them.
So what comes to mind is, one of the things that comes to mind is, what we call scaffolding in the parenting language. I'm sure it's in other areas as well as parenting, but I just think about, maybe they were able to take on, this size of a project before on their own, and maybe they're struggling with it now because they're kind of scattered and more wishy-washy and stuff. And
Good
this would be the
example.
time that you could say, you know what, let's can you think of one little piece of that we could start with, right? And just help them hone in on one little piece and put the rest on the shelf for a while until they can get that done. And they might learn to sort of piece things down a little bit to help for yeah. Does that?
Yeah, that sounds brilliant. Anywhere you can help them simplify.
Okay.
So they don't, because they're already carrying a lot of stress on their shoulders. So anywhere you can help them simplify will probably be wise.
Okay.
Yeah, as they move through that.
Great.
Yeah. Yeah.
Right.
So that's the that's the that's the Saturn in oppositions for this Pluto and Sag cohort.
Yeah.
Yeah.
For this cohort of kids that are like roughly about 13 to 18 now as we're recording this. So,
Right.
do you have anything to add before I kind of wrap us up here? We're at about the 1 hour mark. So I'm just
Great. I feel complete. Yeah.
I feel like we're okay.
Yeah.
So I just want to touch on a couple of points that I think we both mentioned, but just remind parents that using this information, how to best use this information to work with your kids. It's always best, even though you have now a better analytical understanding in your mind of what might be going on for them. I think it hopefully goes without saying that bringing that analysis or that explanation to your teens in conversation with them will be less likely to be helpful. It'll be more likely to disconnect you or to frustrate them. What's most helpful is to tuck that away in the back of your mind now that you know, and think about how you can create, safety, and how you can ask, maybe less direct or more open questions if you need to ask questions at all. How you can support them, really, how you can be compassionate about what they're going through, how you can understand a little bit more deeply what they might be experiencing and what kind of support they need to create. I think for all of them that we touched on, and it always comes back to safety, right? Being able to express ourselves always really comes back to safety and acceptance for where they're at, because, this is just what it is.
It's just passing through.
That's right. And it does have an end. That's right. Thanks for reminding that. There is a light at the end of the tunnel. There's other transits around the corner, but this one, I know I really felt this one in our home. So having this kind of information was really helpful. So I hope that our listening audience has found it helpful as well. And just a reminder that there's in the notes below, there's lots of resources, links for resources. There is a link for Diana's website, and she offers one-on-one sessions for people where she'll do your chart and she'll give you a reading on, whatever topic you're interested in, or whatever the particular crossroad is that you're at in your life. If you're seeing some of the things that we've talked about in the interview today, and you're wanting a little bit more help to connect with your teen or to flesh out how you can stay connected to them, I'll be offering a webinar soon on that, on connecting with your teen. There'll be lots of opportunity for questions and answers as well, and people to bring their specific situations. So that link is in the show notes below as well. And if you're just interested in following either one of us, we both have a blog. I put lots of free content on social media all the time, so there's various ways to follow us. And last but not least, Diane already gave you a little bit of a sneak peek about what's coming. We're going to be doing another talk similar to this for kids who are probably starting at around the toddler age and into the early school years. So if you're interested in that, you can either pop back to this YouTube channel periodically. I'll be posting it on social media, so you can follow me there. Or if you want it to come straight to your inbox so you don't miss it, just sign up for my newsletter. I try not to inundate people with newsletters, but that would be a way to get it directly to your inbox. So thanks again, Diana. Thanks for
having me.
Chatting with me today. Your insights have been helpful, and I always learn more every time I talk to you. So thanks. I really appreciate it.
Thanks for having me, Colleen. Right back at you. This is so valuable. I'm grateful that we're putting our minds together and trying to support people through these tough times. Yeah. Thank you.
Parents can use all the support they can get usually on this topic. Okay.
Okay. Thanks for having me.